go into what is today Jordan. There is a pretty deep valley that they have to cross through to get up onto this plain near the town of Mutta, and the Romans arrived. When we say the Romans, the Ghassanids, and the Ghassanids were Christian Arabs, a vassal state of the Roman Empire. So the number of Romans is probably around 50,000. The Muslims brought 3,000 men, so 3,000 against 50,000. When you see the 50,000, you run away. You don't say, the fighting begins. The Muslim army stayed for the fight. There were 3 people that were designated as commanders by the Prophet Muhammad. One after the other, they died. So they have nobody in charge. There is a person who takes the flag, the banner for the army, goes to Khalid and says, you should be in charge because of his performance at Uhud. They go into this valley and they set up camp across from the Romans for the night. And what Khalid tells his men to do is, instead of having, one fire for every 5 or 10 men, each man makes his own fire. And then periodically the men would get up and they would walk around the fire. So it looked like there were a lot of people there. And it made the numbers look much bigger. So the Romans went, maybe we underestimated the number of men here. That's Khalid's tactic. He's trying to confuse the Romans. So then the next day in the morning, what Khalid does is he takes the banners from all the units. He has the cavalry go down into a valley behind a hill so the Romans can't see. And he has them take one of the banners and they go around the hill and then they come up on top of the hill and then they go down again. And when they go down, most of the riders go back into the valley. One guy goes up on top with the banner. Then the cavalry that had just gone up over the hill takes another banner. They go up over the hill so the Romans can see them. They drop down in the valley. Most of them go back around, but a few go up on top with the new banner. They grab a new banner and then they go back around. They keep doing this. So instead of it looking like there's 500 cavalry arriving, it looks like there's 5,000 cavalry. So the Romans are beginning to think, oh, they're getting all these reinforcements. We had so many more men than we thought. It's causing the Romans to hesitate. That night he does the campfire trick again, and then they run. They just abandon the fires and they take off into the desert. And by this point, the Romans are convinced the whole thing is a trap, and that if they pursue, they'll be ambushed. So they don't pursue, and that's how they escape. Actually wrote the Persian general a note, a letter, said, I'm coming, 633. Abu Bakr has conquered the entire Arabian Peninsula and put it together in 633. Instead of telling Khalid, okay, you've done an amazing job, all these different battles in the river wars, instead of saying, let's take a rest, let's take a break, the Khalifa Abu Bakr says, keep going. And the next thing you know, they're invading the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire had existed for 1,200 years. A person living at the time, if you had said to him, the Persian Empire will end, it would have said, you're insane, that's not possible. The Persian Empire had been a global superpower for more than 1,000 years, and all of a sudden this army is invading. In the mind of the Persians, they're like, oh, it's an Arab raid, this is a nuisance, but let's just go quickly put it down. Khalid actually wrote the Persian general a note, a letter, said, I'm coming. But the way he wrote the letter, it made it sound like he was going to Kazama in Kuwait. On the way to the city that the Persians had as a base was right near where Basra in Iraq is. So Hormuz takes the Persian army to go to Kazama to block his path. Khalid doesn't go to Kazama, he goes to Hufair. Word then arrives from Hormuz scouts that Khalid has gone to Hufair. Hormuz takes the Persian army to Hufair, but in the meantime Khalid has taken the Arab army to Kazama. They turn around and they come back to Kazama and meet Khalid there. The reason he did this elaborate maneuver was he wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Persians were heavy infantry. They had all this armor. So by the time they marched from Basra to Kazama and then Kazama to Hufair and then Hufair back to Kazama, they would be more exhausted than his men. And so they line up, a group of Persians chain themselves together, and then Hormuz challenges Khalid to a duel. It was very common for armies back then to have champion fight before anything happened. An Arab volunteers, he shouts some poetry, the Persians don't care, they're like, let's just get on with it. Hormuz challenges Khalid, they go out into the middle of the field, they fight. What Hormuz had done was he had moved a group of his best men forward a little bit, so that if he died, they were going to rush out and kill Khalid. Khalid kills Hormuz, and somewhere between maybe 6 to 12 Persian soldiers rush out to kill Khalid. And as they're charging at him, Qaqa ibn Amr, one of Khalid's lieutenants, he runs out, and the two men defeat the Persians that had come to kill Khalid, and then the battle. There's 3 Persian armies. They're coming to attack him. By this point, he has Hira, he has as he's conquered a huge chunk of Western Iraq. He knows that there are these his scouts have reported there are these 3 Persian armies coming. If they unify and attack him, he's got 15,000 men. They're roughly 70,000. They're going to outnumber him 4-1. He's worried. He doesn't want them to get together. So what he does is he figures out their course. There are 3 water holes along the way that they're probably going to stop at during the night. So he calculates when they should arrive. He takes his army and he breaks it up into 3 units. His father-in-law, Al-Minhal, takes command of 1. The other one is going to be commanded by Qaqa ibn Amr. And then he's going to take the 3rd one. They're going to time the attack. They're going to go 3 different ways, and then they're going to arrive at the same spot, same time, same night. So to do this, they need some skills. And the way that they pulled it off was the Arabs knew the stars. The Arabs didn't just know the stars by looking at the constellations. They knew how to navigate using the stars. And they can get there at the exact time by looking at the angle of the stars and knowing the dates. And they attack the Persians in their sleep. The Persian army tries to recover, but they're intense. They have to gather their weapons. They're sleepy, they're groggy. It's a disaster. Then they do it again at a place called Thania. Again, the 3 armies arrive at the same time, the same night, and the Persian army was exactly where Khalid thought it would be, and they attack them, and it's devastating. He does do different tactics. In one battle, for example, there's 3 Persian armies. He knows approximately where they're going to end up fighting, so he takes Dirar, one of his lieutenants, and he has Dirar take 2 cavalry units behind a hill. There's a larger mountain range behind where Khalid's going to place his forces. When the Persians deploy, they're ready to attack because they outnumber Khalid, but they decide not to. They're going to wait. He moves forward and starts fighting them, and then he starts to withdraw. And as he's withdrawing, he pulls his army back into a C shape, which draws the Persians in. Dirar takes the 2 cavalry units from behind the mountain, and they hit the Persians from behind. It's a disaster. The Persians go over to the Romans and they say, look, we're having a really big problem here. There's 15,000 Arabs. They have managed to capture what is today Western Iraq, and we don't know that we can stop them. We need your help. And when you think about it, then this is maybe the first ever time to have the Persians and the Romans fight together against a common enemy was unimaginable. What Khalid does, again, so instead of approaching them directly, he crosses the Euphrates River and puts the river in between him and them. And then he goes to Firaz, but he's now on the north bank of the river, and they're on the south bank. And of course they're surprised because they're expecting him to come from the other direction. Khalid parks his army on the Euphrates River, and of course the Romans and Persians are like, no, we're not going to fight you from the river. And he needs them to cross because he needs the river to be an advantage. He's got 15,000 men. The 2 armies combined are roughly 150,000. He's outnumbered 10-1. He needs to use the terrain as much as he can in this circumstance. Like, it should have been impossible. This should have been the end of his army and him. He breaks his army into 3 units, same commanders, Al-Minhal and Qaqa at the river. That part of the river bent, so there was like this natural curve. And then what Khalid did was he took the infantry and he backed it up away from the river. He had a 3rd cavalry unit that he put behind it. When the Romans and the Persians saw that he had made space for him, because he's very welcoming. In the Middle East, it's important to be a good host. When they see that he's made the space for them, they go, okay, let's start crossing. They cross. Khalid's goal was to prevent the Persian army from forming into one unit. Here, he does the opposite. Now, he's trying to get the Romans and the Persians across in a really large number. He'll attack them when they're small. He waits till there's 50,000 men across. So they outnumber more than 3-1. And then he orders the attack. And then he takes his infantry and he runs them up against the Persians and the Romans. The infantry is mostly just supposed to hold them in place. They're fighting, but it's gentle fighting. They're not being aggressive. Then he takes his cavalry and he charges straight at the infantry. The Arab infantry know to make multiple gaps in the line so that Khalid's cavalry, when it hits, it'll hit the Romans and Persians. When he hits them, he pushes them back because of the weight of the horses and the men. And then he pulls back. He turns his cavalry around and he charges again. And every time he does this, he pushes the Persians and the Romans further and further back, and he's compressing them into a smaller and smaller space and too close to use their weapon. So when they realize they've been trapped, the river behind them is cut off because there's these 2 cavalry forces fighting their way to the bridge, they panic. Having 50,000 men turn all at the same time, their bones were breaking. They were being crushed to death. They were trampled. Persians and Romans are jumping into the river, and then Khalid with the infantry and the cavalry behind are just attacking them as they retreat. Khaled's goal was just to compress them. He wasn't trying to kill them. Ultimately, the rest of the Roman and Persian army just run away. Really big Roman army coming. By really big, one of those Roman armies is the size of the entire Arab army in Syria. They were outnumbered 4-1. So there were Romans in the traditional sense. There were Romans that were ethnically Greek. They weren't Italians. There were Germans. The Lombards had shown up. There were Avars, who were what is today Bulgaria, and they were the fiercest enemies of the Romans. They hated them, but the Romans paid them. There were Lahmid Arabs. They were Christian Arabs. And there were Turks. The Turks were fighting for the Romans at this time as mercenaries. The Roman army is this multi-ethnic army with different fighting styles, probably right about 120,000 Romans and about 30,000 Arabs. And the commander is Prince Vahan. He's in Armenia. Vahan actually sent an embassy to talk to Khaled, and Khaled was like, there's nothing to talk about. What would we do? They're going to have the battle. At that point, a letter arrives from the new Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he demotes Khaled and takes away his command and hands it to Abu Ubaidah. Abu Ubaidah brings his generals together and he says, okay, who here wants Khalid ibn al-Walid to be in command? And he raises his hand. He believes that Khalid can see combat in a way that a normal human being can't. That he'll get them through this. Everybody agrees. Khalid's like, I don't want to be in charge. You're in charge. And he goes, no, we voted. You're in charge. His first action is to return the taxes because, he says, with the taxes, we taxed them because we were going to give them government services. We were going to be in charge of them. So we will have stolen their money. If we're going to lose, we need to lose with honor. We need to lose with dignity. We need to lose as people who did the right thing. And of course, everybody's like, well, what are you talking about? So he says, if we win, we'll come back and take the taxes. This way we can die honest. They agree. They return the tax. I don't know of any army that's ever done anything like that. An army that thought, we might not win. How do we want to be remembered as losers? No, who does that? It shows a level of ethical behavior. So if you wanted to know who Khalid was, I think that's the moment. The Romans are going to have a really hard time if all four armies are in one place. Let's not fight them separately. So again, it's the opposite of what he did when he did the night attack. He wants to bring them all together in one place. He knows it'll put a strain on the Roman supply system and their economy. He takes all the Arab armies that are scattered in Palestine and Syria, and he orders them to go to one spot in southern Syria. And that spot, of course, is Yarmouk. Yarmouk has two canyons, one on the west and one in the south. And then Khalid parks his army perpendicular to the southern canyon on the eastern end. So there's a space in between the two canyons and his army. Khalid had divided his army into four. The one on the right flank, so on the northern end, was going to be commanded by Amr ibn al-As. Then Shurahbil had the center right. The center left was Abu Ubaidah. And then the far left was Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan. And then behind that, Khalid put two cavalry units. And then he had a third cavalry unit that was like the strategic reserve cavalry unit that he would be in direct command of in the back. And so he just gently moves his army forward. There's light fighting. It lasts throughout the day. The Romans built a tower behind the army so that Vahan could be in the top and he could look out across the field and evaluate the fight. The fighting lasts for hours. Eventually Vahan calls the army back, the Romans back up, they disengage. Day two, after hours and hours and hours of fighting, they're back where they started. The third day, Prince Vahan decides they put enormous strain again, and the Arab army starts to break again. And that's at that point that Khalid again releases little by little, begin to push back, and eventually they get back to where they started the day. The real thing that was tearing up the Roman morale is that on day 2 and day 3, the battle ends where it started. Khalid keeps prevailing, and every time it does, it works for Khalid's side because the morale of the Romans keeps sinking because they can't understand why they can't win. Another thing is affecting Roman morale. Reinforcements are showing up. They're not huge. We're talking 1,000 here, 1,000 there, and they spread it out. It's this constant trickle, and the Romans are looking at this constant trickle thinking, how many are coming? There are big names. For example, Abu Sufyan are amongst these that are showing up. Day 4. This time it doesn't break. The Romans are launching arrows. A lot of people get blinded or lose an eye during the day, including Abu Sufyan. He loses an eye that day. So on day 5, a Roman, by himself, one Roman, walks into the middle of the battlefield, and he approaches the Arab army. And of course the Arab army is like, what's this guy doing? And he says, I'm here to negotiate. And Khalid, he puts out a mat, and they bring dates. And the Roman sits down, and Khalid sits down, and they start negotiating. The Roman's saying, what if we give you Palestine and we keep Syria? We'll let you take all the plunder you've already taken. When they move south, they abandon Damascus and Homs. The Romans have retaken those cities. So they're like, this could be the border right here. And Khalid is entertaining the guy. But then Khalid starts to talk about other things. He's talking about the weather and how nice things have been lately. And the Roman, after hours of negotiating, asks, you're not negotiating with me anymore, are you? And Khalid goes, no, of course not. He goes, what did you waste my time for? Khalid understood that the only reason the Romans would send a negotiator was they were broken, that their hearts were broken. They were no longer in the fight. There's one man standing. Khalid goes up to him and he says, you are a warrior and you deserve a warrior's death. And they fight one-on-one. The whole Roman left flank is crumbling under the pressure. They're being attacked on every side. It's devastating. The Roman cavalry is defeated. It becomes clear to the Romans that the battle is over and they begin to break and run. A group of them run west towards the bridge. Problem was during the night, Khalid had sent men to capture the bridge. So when the Romans arrive, they just become prisoners. Some Romans take off north and they do escape, including Prince Fahan. He manages to go north. Khalid decides to pursue him. He did have some soldiers with him. The Khalid soldiers defeat the Roman soldiers that were with Prince Fahan. Khalid soldiers have strict instructions not to hurt Prince Fahan. And then there's one man standing. Khalid goes up to him and he says, you are a warrior and you deserve a warrior's death. I will not let you suffer at the hands of Emperor Heraclius. I'm here to give you your death. And they fight one-on-one. Khalid does kill him in the end, and that's how Prince Fahan dies. Somebody points out that Khalid is Omar's cousin. This could work. That they could pretend that this is the Khalifa. The Arab army arrives, and they have a really big problem. Jerusalem has springs inside it. It's a walled-off city. Sophronius, he's the archbishop. Sophronius kept sending word to Emperor Heraclius, please send assistance, need to lift the siege, I need your help, send military aid. And Heraclius has a problem. His army that he sent to do this is already destroyed. He doesn't really have the means to help the city. He goes to Antioch, and he says, yeah, farewell to Syria. You've been a wonderful province for Rome. May you be a wonderful province for your new masters. And he goes to Constantinople. He's given up. And so Sophronius finally figures it out. So Sophronius sends word to the Arab army, look, I'm ready to negotiate terms. I have to do it with the Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab. I will not do it with anybody else. And so there's a discussion that the generals have. Somebody points out that Khalid is Omar's cousin. This could work. That they could pretend that this is the Khalifa. Abu Ubaidah goes, no, I think this is a terrible mistake. We shouldn't do this. So they finally talk Abu Ubaidah into doing this. So they pretend that Khalid is the Khalifa. He approaches the wall, and Sophronius is standing on the wall, but there's a Roman standing next to Sophronius who had seen Khalid before and whispers to Sophronius, no. Sophronius is furious. He's outraged, and he shouts at the men down below, and he tells them, look, I know you tried to trick me. I will not negotiate until the Khalifa arrives. So they have to send word to Medina and bring the Khalifa. He leading a camel, and there's a man on top of the camel, and Sophronius comes out. He doesn't know where the Khalifa is. He just sees there's a group of men coming. He gets in his lectica, the couch that we ride in Roman times, and men carry you. And so there's like 6 or 8 men carrying him. He's got his big red hat, and he's wearing red silk robe, and he has the gold tassels, and he approaches this new entourage of Arabs coming. He looks up at the guy riding the camel, and he says, where is the leader of the Arab? And the guy riding the camel gestures to the man leading the camel. Sophronius goes, oh, okay, do you know where the Khalifa is? And the man leading the camel says, I'm the Khalifa. He's a plain dressed man. He's not covered in gold. He's not wearing dyed red silk robes. And Sophronius can't comprehend this because the Roman emperor wears purple silk and covered in gold. And he goes, wait, you're the leader of the Arabs who have conquered us. Sophronius is an Arab. He's a Christian Arab with Roman citizenship. So he's speaking to them in Arabic. And some of the Arab soldiers had chainmail and they had nice clothing and fantastic horses. And here's the ruler of the Arabs, a humbly dressed man leading a camel. Ibn al-Khattab says, I only own one camel and this is my assistant. It was his turn to ride. We take turns riding. And Sophronius can't believe what he's hearing. Like, I have 8 men carry me and you're letting your assistant ride the camel? Sophronius says, I'm here here to negotiate the surrender terms. The Khalifa says, let me tell you what I'm thinking, and then you tell me if you agree. The Khalifa says, I want all the Roman politicians to leave. They can leave with whatever they can carry. Not the religious leadership, but the political leadership. And Sophronius goes, wait, what about plundering the city? I was here to negotiate on violence that you do to the people as you're plundering the city. I was here to make it so that you didn't enslave people. And the Khalifa goes, why would I do these things? I'm here to take Jerusalem as peacefully as possible. I don't want to hurt anybody if I can. In the process, you're surrendering. Why would we? Sophronius goes, because the Romans would. The Romans would plunder your city. If the tables were turned, we would take your goods and your gold and your land. And the Khalifa goes, no, we're not that way. Sophronius says, well, I surrender the city. There's nothing to negotiate. Khaled turns to his wife and his two sons, Abdul Rahman and Muhajir. They find a house that was abandoned by the Romans and they move in. And eventually Muawiyah becomes the governor of Syria. He appoints Abdul Rahman ibn Khalid ibn ولید to become governor of Homs. And so the family settles in. They get a nice position for the oldest son. Khalid will die in 642 at roughly the age of 50. So he was, in his 40s when he was out there fighting. And he says, there isn't a place you can put a hand on my body and you wouldn't touch a scar. And here I am in bed dying like a cow.